We find more good in our own life when we put more good in. It's okay if I'm not great at every aspect of something in the beginning. You don't have to be great to start, but you got to start to be great.
What is a failure that you have had that ended up being one of your greatest lessons?
I would say a failure that I would consider a failure early on for me, young, is when I was on the book field selling books. I'll never forget. I spent the time, I memorized my sales scripts, had my books, I was ready. And I went to the very first house that I've ever knocked on when I was selling books door to door, and I knocked on the house and my mind completely went blank. I had no idea what to say. I was nervous, and I basically said, hey, do you happen to know who lives next door? Totally not in script at all. I forgot everything. And so from that, I left that house and I got in the car and I was a little bit down on myself. I was a little bit depressed. I was a little bit like, can I really do this? Gosh, I'm really kind of feeling nervous right now. And I remember what Zig Ziglar said. He said, you won't get the butterflies to go away, but you can get them flying in formation. So I thought to myself, all right, what am I going to do? I failed at that attempt. What am I going to do in the midst of that emotion? I'm out here in some town that I don't know anybody in the summertime. It's hot. You know, I'm getting ready to start this internship, selling books to people that I don't know, meeting people that I don't know, knocking doors 80 hours a week plus. Those are, again, when I was younger for a couple years. And so I made the decision to say, all right, how can I take that failure and be more intentional to be focused in the moment? And what I did, Rigby, is I said to myself, all right, let me think about it this way. What do I have right now? I started the book field. I didn't have any money. I just kind of started. I really had nothing. So I said, I have nothing. So if I go to the next door and I don't make another sale, you know what I'm going to have? Nothing. The same thing that I have now. So I have nothing to lose, which put me in a mindset that said, okay, because of that, I may not remember the entire sales script, but I'm going to take small steps to win. I'm going to at least focus on getting this part of the script out this time. And then the next house, I'm going to focus on getting the next 2 or 3 pieces, and the next 2 or 3 pieces. You know, I think that's really the key. Is that was a failure that I had that was small, but it taught me the lesson that you don't have to be great at everything. You don't have to be great to start, but you got to start to be great. And so it's this mindset that I had to be willing to step in and step in and step in. And unfortunately in life, a lot of times people want to be in a place where they are paid a lot of money. Hey, I've showed up here. I've done all this work. I've done all of these things. But you know, that's just not how life works. You don't go sit in front of the fireplace. That's a real wood burning fireplace, and there's no logs and there's no fire, and you say, give me heat. It doesn't work like that. You got to get up without pay. You got to cut the tree down. You got to chop the wood up. You got to bring the wood in. You got to set the wood in the fireplace. You got to prepare the kindling. You got to light the fire. You got to work the fire. And then finally the fire grows and you get the heat. And so the reality of it is these small steps in life will ultimately help you accomplish greater success in life. But you have to tell yourself it's okay if I'm not great at every aspect of something in the beginning, because no one is. And so that was one of the things when I took a failure on the book field and I said to myself, okay, how can I learn from that and not just wallow in it and kind of, you know, you've heard me say before, the plum disease, poor little old me, but actually take that failure that I had and then build on that to say, okay, I may not remember it all the next time, the entire script the next time, the next home I knock on, but can I remember 10%, 20% more than I remembered the first time, which was basically nothing, right? And so that was my goal. How do I get 10% better, 20% better, 50% better? You've heard people talk about how do I just get 1% better every day, right? And that's hard to kind of quantify, but the reality of it is when you're doing something in business, sometimes it's like, how do I just get a little bit better every single day? How do I expect more out of myself? And you've heard me say it before, you know, when you do more than you're paid to do, you'll eventually, it may not happen in the time that you want it to happen, because there's a lot of metrics you can't control. But when you do more than you are paid to do, the day will come when you are paid more for what you do. And that's really the truth. That's what I found. And that's one of the things that I'll say when you take a failure and improve. Now, when I started my first company years ago, you know, I was able to continue to take that philosophy and adopt it to everything that we've done. I can't tell you, not months, not days, not weeks, but how many years and years and years and years that I worked, and the amount of money that I made for the work that I put in was not proportionate. I was putting way more work in for years and years and years and years and years and years, proportionate to the level of work that I made. The problem and the challenge that I see, not with everybody, but with some folks in our culture today, is they think, hey, I was at a job for 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years, and now I deserve X, Y, Z. When the reality of it is, sometimes the founder of the business that they were in has been working hard for years and years and years and years, foregoing their own success, putting back into a company that they built so that way people can have a job, And if the generation culture that works today sees that, they'll say, okay, I'm willing to put in whatever it takes to add a ton of value to the company. And I believe that if I'm working for somebody, or maybe you're starting your own business, you're in a place that success will eventually come. But you're willing to kind of learn from those failures by getting better and better and better and showing up better and be more efficient each and every day. That's how you take a failure and turn it into a success, because you don't spend time, you evaluate it, you see how you can grow from it, and then you take action. I literally paid myself like $30,000 a year for the first 7 years of being in business. Now it eventually started to grow, but I just kept putting money back into the business. I lived low. You know, my first apartment was $400 a month. My first house was $82,000. Like I lived low. I didn't buy nice cars. I kept putting back into the business. And when you have that mindset, all of a sudden, you know, like John Maxwell says, which I love, it takes a long time to become an overnight success. So when people out there see you kind of blow up, they're like, oh my gosh, it was so easy for them. Look at this, what's happened. What they didn't see is the years and years and years and years of dedication, trials, you know, investing money into ideas that don't work, which is how you learn, you know, all of this stuff. And then eventually you blow up and they're like, oh, look how easy that is. But most people aren't willing to do those years of time in advance to allow themselves the opportunity to blow up in public, so to speak, not in a bad way, but in a good way. But they're not willing to put the time in advance. That's really the key, is be willing. And that's what I shared with that guy that was knocking doors. I said, keep doing what you're doing, build your brand, share your story, share your ideas, but don't be fake about it. Like, don't talk about the reality that you're doing this and you're doing that, and yet the reality of it is you're really not. You're just talking about it because you're trying to sell a course to somebody that doesn't understand anything, and you're just a good talker. Like, be real and genuine about the years of success that you've had. You know what I'm saying? That'll pay dividends long term. Being in business now almost 26 years, I've seen a lot of things, you know, and so you learn from that.
So I hear you talk a lot about how important it is to control your brain or mindset. What are some practical examples that you can use in everyday life with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think controlling your brain and mindset is crucial because, you know, as we talked about Rigby in the car on the way here, if you can't control your mindset and you can't stay positive when challenges in life occur, you're going to miss opportunity. If you have a negative mindset, you're not going to go after something, and you're not going to insert yourself to build something that you don't believe will happen in the first place because you're focused on the negative. You're focused on the bad. There's a lot of bad things that happen in life. It's just the way it is. Bad things happen to good people. We live in a fallen, you know, imperfect world. But the reality of it is, when you're in a place where in life you train your mind to see the good, we call it good finders. You know, look for the good in people, not the negative. It's real easy to say, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you did this bad. When you start to be a good finder in life, you not only do that with other people, which will help your relationships, help build your relationships, help you see more opportunity, but you also want to do that to yourself. You know, encourage yourself. You know, David in the Psalms said, I encouraged myself in the Lord. The importance of self-talk. How can we encourage our own mind? You know, even the Bible tells us in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, to be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. And so it's this idea of, we must understand that the world is going to come at us with a negative context, negative vibe. All we got to do is look outside, look on social media, and we can see all of the horrific things and challenges that we face. But if we don't take the responsibility ourselves, and it's our responsibility, it's no one else's, to control our mind, then we will not see the opportunities that might lie in front of us, and we'll miss out on things that could potentially allow us the ability to grow, not only in our life, in our profession, and just in general. So controlling your mindset is huge. Listening to positive information is huge. Connecting with the right friends is huge. You know, just being intentional about what comes across your mind. By the way, a great way to do this is to take an evaluation of yourself. And when you think about how your day looks like, from when you wake up in the morning to throughout your day, what do you think about? Is it positive or is it negative? Do you think about, you know, why you don't have opportunities and other people do? Or are you actively thinking about, all right, today's a great day, and I believe that I can do anything that I can set my mind to, because I have a lot of gifts and abilities. And by the way, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, the Bible says, right? So in other words, are you in a place where you have the mindset where you're saying, I can chase after this and do it really well, and I'm willing to learn and grow and work harder than anybody else to put myself in a place where I can succeed in a way that no one else has succeeded? But it all starts with the mindset. Again, if you don't have, or you're not intentional, by the way, no one's born with a positive mindset. It doesn't just happen. Just like when you look at a child, you don't have to teach a child to do the wrong thing. Little kids naturally know how to do somehow the wrong thing because we're born into a sin nature. What we have to do is teach them how to do the right thing. So similarly with our minds are bent or geared towards the negative. I mean, just look at it, what it looks like when you're driving on the road and there's an accident. It's called rubberneckers. People stop and look over to the left, right? People are naturally, unfortunately, drawn to the negative. What we have to do is condition ourselves to be drawn to the positive, to find the good, not only in life and in others, but also in our own life. We find more good in our own life when we put more good in, listening to positive information, having encouraging friends. And that doesn't mean that we disregard the reality that there's challenges in this world. We're not walking through life like la 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 with fingers in our ears saying nothing bad is happening. We're just making the conscious decision to focus our mindset on where we want to go. Rigby, one of the things that I personally do, I get up in the morning, and I'll be honest with you, I don't do this every single day, but I do it probably 80 to 85% of the days. Here's what I do. I wake up. Before I even get out of bed, I'm in a situation where the first thing that I say in my mind is, this is the day the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. And I don't necessarily say that verbally, but I say that in my mind. This morning, as an example, before I came here and we got on the plane, I was a little bit slow, I was a little bit sluggish. So what did I do? Did about 100 jumping jacks, did some push-ups. I'm getting my blood flowing. I'm taking responsibility for my physical body. And when your blood flows, your oxygen flows and your mind grows, right? So you want to be in a place where you think about how can I prime my mind with my physical action? You'll find some of the most unmotivated people are people that are overweight. People that don't exercise. And it's because they're not priming their brain. People that are successful typically are somewhat in shape because they're priming their mind to prepare for success. So waking up in the morning and saying that, this is the day the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it. Being in a situation where you're saying, okay, I'm excited for the day. I'm looking for positive for the day. I spent some time reading some of God's word, maybe a Proverbs or a Psalms. Sometimes, not always, I'll listen to a worship song, right? Now that doesn't always happen, but I am in a situation that more times than not, I'm doing practical things to listen to positive, think about positive, and actionably do things to get my brain in the right place. A lot of people want to be an entrepreneur. They like the idea of what that sounds like and potentially could look like. But the reality of it is, if they're honest with themselves, they're not. They're not willing to step out and take the risk. They're not willing to risk their own money. They're not willing to really grow something. They're not willing to take deferred and delayed gratification. They're in a place where they're spending their income on the stuff that they want now. That's a great sign that you're not an entrepreneur, because you're not willing to take your money and live on less and prepare for what's next. So that's the first thing that I would say. Are you an entrepreneur or are you not? Both are fine. But then the other thing is, you want to work in an environment where you have a CEO that is willing to reward you for what you're doing. Now, the reality of it is, sometimes it's important to talk through what that reward looks like and when it could potentially come. I'll give you an example. So if you're in a situation where you create something that gives us the ability to drive another $1 million a year in revenue, not business, but revenue to the business, I'm in a place where you become increasingly more valuable because you have gone out of your way to figure out things that have actually brought revenue to the firm. This is one of the things that a lot of people don't understand, or they don't think about this way. Every single aspect of every business, with the exception of sales and new business, is cost. Accounting is cost. Administration is cost. Research and development is cost. Video creation is cost. Office space, developing office space, doing things is all cost. When you get down to saying, okay, there are certain things that we have to do that are cost, that doesn't mean you're not valuable, but where you find more value is when you bring more revenue to the business. So I would say if you're working for a CEO that doesn't value the fact that you can bring value, just like we talked earlier about the idea of creating an app and doing things like that. Well, in my opinion, if we create something like that, initially there's cost, right? So the mindset of someone might be like, hey, I brought this idea to the table. This is a really great idea. I want to make more money. Well, first we got to offset the cost that we're paying to implement the idea. So if I got to spend $300,000 to implement this idea, well, now all of a sudden I got to make the money back to implement the idea. And then we're in a place where we can say, how can we use this to market in a way to bring in new business or to simplify, or maybe it makes it easier. And now we start to track and tether the new business. And now we take it down to a granular level. What's the revenue made on what I'm doing and what I did to create for you? So now in the business, that becomes the focus. If you're working for somebody that you believe really has the business's best interest at heart first, and then employees second, Employees are part of the business, but if the business doesn't exist, you don't have a job. And so that's what I would say is, number one, are you an entrepreneur or not? Number two, are you working for a CEO that you really believe is going to reward the value that you put in? And you're going to have to, and someone is, you're going to have to trust their judgment as far as what they perceive as value and what you perceive as value, because you're coming from two lenses. And if you have the right CEO, I can tell you from my perspective, I've never had to financially take anyone and have them go backwards. Like I've never in my 26 years of being in business had to pay somebody less because we had some type of major market shift. I've never had to lay anyone off because we've had a major market shift. Why? Because my mindset isn't today and tomorrow. It's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And so my goal is to grow things sustainably. So that way everybody that's on the ship has an opportunity, Lord willing, to be on the ship 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And then as they continue to bring value in different capacities, they're going to increase revenue as time moves along, but it's going to be proportionate to what I believe that they're doing and when they're doing it and when they deserve to receive it. Does that make sense? Because it shows consistency and effort and time. Now that may not necessarily align with how the employee views what they're doing. And obviously the employee has every right to say, I'm going to go shop and find a new CEO that I believe is going to bring me more value. But those are the things that I would look at is, if you're putting a lot of value year over year over year over year, what's a time frame? I think if you work for a company for 5 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and you put a lot of value in, and the CEO of the company or whoever it is that's kind of helping you make more money there doesn't acknowledge that, and you've seen the company and the business grow, then I think you should probably start thinking about doing something else. But what a lot of employees don't understand is, quite honestly, the truth is, a new employee is pretty much all cost for the first 2 to 5 years because they have to learn everything they don't know. They're in a situation where they're learning their lane within the business, what they really want to do, what they really don't like to do. It's just like dating. Like you date somebody in the first 3 months, 4 months, if you're attracted physically to one another, it's easy. Maybe even the first year. But after you get past the first year, year and a half, 2 years, then you get beyond the veneer and you get into like, who is this person really? There's some things that I kind of don't like. There's some things that I do like. You have to focus on the areas that you're going to grow together in. Same way with a business. When you work a job, it might take you a year and a half to figure out, all right, where do I really, maybe 2 years even, where do I really fit? And if it's a growing, expanding business, new opportunities come, you're like, well, I kind of like this instead of that, or I like this instead of that. So it's going to take a little bit of time, which is why I think 5 years, some people might disagree with me there. It's why I think 5 years is a good track record to really be in a place where you say, okay, I've focused, I understand, I've given all in. You have some young people that are still in college, which tells the CEO, by the way, this isn't any you or not, but it tells the CEO are they really all in? Are they looking somewhere else or not? We're not sure. Does that make sense? So you have all of these factors, but the person's finding their lane, the CEO's connecting, you're finding this true connection. And then after 2, 3, 4 years, you're kind of really, for lack of a better word, cooking with gas. And now the CEO's like, all right, this is a lifer. And if it's the right CEO, they're going to open valves for somebody to really pour in. Now, somebody that's a little bit older and more established, that might be different. It might not take as much time, but I think a 3 to 5 year window is really a good time frame for the person to say, all right, hey, this is the value that I've brought. This is what I've done. These are the things consistently there. I've showed up well. I've showed up early. I've been on call. All this stuff. I know what I want to do in the business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They're not still bouncing and being like, well, what do I want to do inside of this company?
Yeah.
Which makes it harder for the CEO to really be like, yeah, because they're like, well, you're doing this and you're doing this and you're doing this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So part of it's discovery on both sides. The good thing is if it's a younger person like yourself, who cares if it takes 5 years to really discover? If you're with a great company, like you're going to have an amazing career. And those first 5 years of almost somewhat static growth is worth it to find the lane that you can run fast in. And then you're in a place where you're like, I know that I really like this. And I know that this is a company that I want to work for the rest of my career. It's growing, the energy, the people. Does that make sense? The leadership. I've found my lane. Yes, maybe financially I'm not making exactly the money that I want to make, but I've been learning how to add more value to the business. And I've learned what I really like. And now I know, and the owner, the CEO knows, let's go. Does that make sense? So that's the challenge a lot of times for younger folks. And when I say younger folks, I mean people in their early 20s. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the ones always going out driving revenue to the business. Let's say you create something that takes weight off of someone that's like a lead advisor or someone that's a lead salesperson, that lets them have the ability to then go out and create more revenue to the business. Now, indirectly, you've created revenue to the business. I mean, think about it. Most kids go to college, young kids go to college for 4 years, 6 years. And really, if they're honest about it, I would say 80 to 90% of them while they're there are just trying to figure out what they want to do in life, right? Yeah. So imagine going to a company and you're working a job that you've never worked before, especially if it's a growing business. Like, it's going to take you some time to figure out what you like and what you want to do. And the CEO is not under obligation to pay you a lot of money if you're not really bringing significant value to the business. You might look at it as significant value, but their lens of being in business 25, 26, 30, 35, whatever years is different than your lens that's only been in business 2 or 3 years. And you didn't take the risk to start what exists in the first place. So there's very different parameters. Here's what I will tell you is this: those that are willing to take more risk will always make more money, period. People that aren't willing to take the risk may not like that. They may not think it's fair, but it's how the world works. Especially if you work for a smaller business, which is typically where you're going to have more opportunity to grow. The key is not bringing value in your mind to the company. The key is asking the person that owns the business what they think value is. And by the way, it's okay to be willing to I might bring 10 ideas and they only perceived one of them as value. That's okay. Talk about me. I could sit there and say, okay, you're bringing all these projects that sound great, but let's talk about the millions of dollars that I spent that some people could say that I wasted, but that I didn't waste. I used it to test marketing ideas. Like, that's the reason after years and years and years of doing these things, spending millions of dollars on different ideas, like, I've learned a lot of what works. Do things change? Yes. Does technology change? Yes. But people don't change. And generally what people need and want and are attracted to, as a general rule, the psychology of understanding what people are drawn to, that doesn't change. And so somebody that spent millions of dollars to learn things, even though they might be older, has a lot of wisdom to bring to the table to say, how do I apply this real market world experience and real dollars that I spent to understand these things, and then apply it and collaborate it with a younger thinking and technology. Now you got a recipe for success. Does that make sense? Let's say you worked for a company, okay? And let's say you were paid a salary and you knew you're not an entrepreneur, but you're willing to take a little bit of risk, right? Or some things in general. So you're like, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, on my own time, I work for the company, but I'm going to, on my own time, creatively get the approval to get different things. And I'm going to go and find different ways. And I'm going to go do man on the street. And I'm going to ask people questions about their money and I'm going to post it online. That's exactly why I'm so grateful. Or I'm going to go somewhere and I'm going to advertise or market the company just by being around. I'm going to actively wear my merch in different places. I'm going to actively be thinking about how can I penetrate the marketplace with the. So now you're doing things on your own dime, and you're doing it to try and promote the brand and help the brand. Or maybe you're in a situation where you're saying, you know what, I work a salary job, but I'd like to grow in my own personal wealth journey. I'd like to learn how to invest better personally. I'd like to take some of the things that I'm learning maybe at the business or things in general and grow my own investment. Unfortunately, people don't do that. You know what they do when they're not on the job? They go to the gym, they go to the bar, they go out in the boat. When you understand and you collaborate and connect with an entrepreneur, even though they're a true entrepreneur that loves the craft, you may not see them at the office 10 hours a day, but I guarantee you their mind is always thinking about how to grow, develop new business, new ways to add value to clients, always. EYG, we've talked about it. Everywhere you go. Like, I'm in a mindset, as an example, Bree, where it doesn't matter where I'm at. I am always thinking about business, collaboration, and connection. Always. I can't get it away from me. Now, that doesn't mean that every connection and interaction that I have has some type of indirect request behind it. I do have great relationships with a lot of people like when I go to church, as an example. That's a time I'm not thinking about business. I'm not wearing a logoed shirt. I'm not wearing things. I'm there to be there. We go to dinner. I go to dinner with my wife, hanging out. I'm present in the moment. I go out with friends. I'm present in the moment. But as a general rule of thumb, if you asked me how many hours a day I'm either on the phone, thinking about business, thinking about creating something, talking to somebody on the team, we got people out in the West Coast, we got people on the East Coast. So I'm on the phone answering questions from people a lot. If you asked me how many hours a week that I think about or do something in relation to business, probably 60 to 70 hours a week. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not on vacation. That doesn't mean I'm not playing golf and tennis with my wife. That doesn't mean I'm not hanging at the pool at Trump. That doesn't mean I'm not doing some of those things just because of how I'm wired. I'm literally thinking about things. That doesn't mean I'm not present with my kids, but I'm just always thinking about How do I tie dots together? That is a true entrepreneur. Somebody that's not a true entrepreneur goes and clocks in, they work a job, they're plugged in, maybe they do an idea here or there when they're off the job, but for the most part, when they're not working, they're not working. They're hanging out, they're not thinking about it, they're doing their thing. The CEO's mind is on all the time. Great way to do this is to say, okay, you're aligned with a good brand, you're working a salary job, you want to add more value to your company, and you want to watch your company become more front and center in the marketplace, in the particular service or products that they offer. So now you're in a place where your eyes wide open. You say, as an example, our brand, Wall Companies, a bunch of different companies that do different things. Well, we work in some way, shape, or form in providing investment and tax opportunities through different ways and capacities for wealthy families. So now we're in a place where we say, okay, we're working with wealthy families. That's what we do. Now you're off the job. You're off the 9 to 5, you're hanging with your boyfriend, you're out on the boat on the weekend, you're shopping at the mall, you're traveling, you're whatever. But your mindset is focused and you look at different luxury products. You're looking at different luxury opportunities, stores, things, whatever. How do they market? What do they do? What does their website look like? How do they interact with people? Everything is sales. You're being sold stuff all the time. So now you look at 1 or 2 or 3 ideas, you're like, wow, that was really cool how they did that. It was neat. It was done in such a way that it was very tactful. It made me feel good about how they presented that product. And the target client that this company goes after is the same type of target client that we serve. So how do we take what this company is doing and translate it and apply it to what we're doing to give us a little bit of a different spin on our brand to connect with clients in a different way? You're not taking the financial risk, but you're thinking this way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In the beginning of my career, you think back, it's almost 26 years ago, which is crazy. I really didn't want to build a business. You know, I wanted to be in business, but I didn't want to build a business. I didn't understand what it took. I thought I knew what it took. Yeah, I was honing my craft, but then also, you know, the biggest challenge, and you see this sometimes with the younger generation, is they can come out of the chute and they make money and they think they're in a situation where they got it. You know, it's almost like one of the worst things that can happen to somebody that's like trading options or trading stocks, I'm going to say options, is that they make a bunch of money the first year or the second year. Because they're like, gosh, I got this, I'm a rock star, like I know I'm an expert in this. And then they end up taking more and more and more risk. I'm not opposed to taking calculated risk, but they haven't had enough time in business. It's not that they're unknowledgeable. It's not that they can't do it. It's just they haven't had enough time in business to experience different things. It's almost like if you're captaining a ship, right? And you've only ever captained the boat on the intercoastal, and you captained the boat for 3 years, primarily on the intercoastal only, but you've never taken the boat over to the Bahamas. You've never taken the boat to the Keys, the Florida Keys. Yes, you've been on the water. Yes, you've captained the boat, but you've never been out in the middle of the ocean when it's rough and you've had a big storm. So there's just certain things you just don't know. You can read about it. You can get an app. You can watch a video.
But until you experience it.
Until you experience it. And I talk to some of our younger guys. Yes, they have the knowledge, the head knowledge, but they don't have the experiential knowledge of what it looks like. Like you can read about being at war until you're blue in the face. But until you're standing there with somebody with a gun in front of your head and you have to emotionally react with the knowledge that you know and do it right every time, that's a completely different deal. And that's why, you know, the generation today has a lot of knowledge. They just don't have the experiential knowledge of actually application in daily business over time. They don't have the experiential knowledge of spending money and balancing the budget so that way they don't run out of money in 2 years and their business goes broke. Obviously, I took risks from the beginning. I was straight commission. You know, I had to figure it out. I would say it was probably about 5 years in, 4 or 5 years in, when I started thinking about hiring someone else, like another advisor. I actually did that. I started looking at people. I started interviewing. I already had a couple staff that just supported me. And, you know, I interviewed people and I just like, I don't want to do this. Like it's babysitting people. You're talking to younger people that think they know everything. I kind of went the other direction, and the other direction that I went was, I'm going to continue to just double down on my own knowledge. I'm going to double down on my own research. I'm going to double down on my own understanding of the investment space and different aspects of it, from real estate to private equity to markets to off market, et cetera. And that's really what I focused on. And that was the goal. And then as time grew and time went along, I said, you know what? really what transitioned me was saying, okay, I've been doing this at this time now 15, 18, 17 years, built companies, exited, helped other companies grow, the whole thing. And I just got to the place of like, I don't want to just take all of this knowledge that I've built, product knowledge, industry knowledge, emotional knowledge, and really throw it away. Like, it really was a lot of prayer, Brian. And I just felt like I believe God is leading me to build something beyond myself. I talk to the team all the time about this is kind of like the last 5 to 7 years of me being in business, even though I've been in business 26 years, has kind of been 2.0. Like, I really believe that it's now my goal and job to build a company. We've built a brand. We've built a lot of great success. We've helped a lot of families for a long time. But I feel like the transition in the last 5 to 7 years is to really build a business and find the right people that are really willing to, for lack of a better word, drink the Kool-Aid. And we operate in such a way that if somebody comes in, I want them to have a ceilingless opportunity financially. I want them to be teachable. I want them to be trainable. I want them to work hard. I want them to be a self-starter. But if they're in a situation where they come in, Steve and I had this conversation. I talked to Rigby about this when we were at Trump the other day. Like, if somebody comes in and they're like, well, I'm going to do it this way and this way and this way. It's like, this isn't the firm for you. Like, I figured this out over the last 26 years. That's just what it looks like. And now we're building a company. And the result of it is young people that work for the business that are able to help families, wealthy families, with taxes and investment opportunities and build plans in ways that, quite honestly, just a lot of other, quote, advisors can't. So no, when I first started out, I didn't want to build a business. It's a pain in the ass to train people. Well, so here's what's interesting, I think, that makes us different. I'm not in a hurry to hire. Like, every single person that we have worked, that works on our team has been brought in some way, shape, or form to me. Now, that might sound crazy, but that's just what's happened. So I'm not in a hurry to hire. I'm always looking. I'm not giving a bunch of candy out right away. I'm saying, here's how we operate. Here's what we do. This is what it looks like. You're going to have to cut your teeth. You're not going to come in with this big fat salary. Like, if you want to make more than you've ever made, then you got to be willing to make less than you'll ever make. And you got to be willing to go after it. And if you're not okay with that, then you're not the right person for this company. Okay. Go work for a Wells Fargo or Merrill Lynch or someone else that's going to give you a salary because you got a degree and you finish your PhD or you finish your, whatever. I don't care about that. What I care about is teachability, integrity, hard work, and team player. And if you're willing to do those 4 things, you'll surpass every other advisor. This has been my experience. There's a great chance that you'll surpass every other advisor that's in the space, as long as you're willing to get your feet dirty and hands dirty. It's not just what you do on the job. It's you showing up and putting in the work. Like Bree just showed me as an example. She did that off the job, putting a whole new app together for what we potentially may roll out. She did all the research. And it wasn't like, hey, here's an idea. She has a 10-page PowerPoint with all of these ideas that have been well thought through of how we're going to use it. Pros, cons, challenges, issues, benefits. That's her off the job, bringing me an idea that was well thought through. And so because of that, I'm saying, I like this. That is what it's about. But when you cast a good vision of where you're going, and again, the vision isn't like how much is enough. The answer is you never get to enough if you're on the journey of really helping people. When I was younger, the high used to be making X amount of dollars. It used to be making the next quote sale, bringing in a new client. Yep. That used to be the high. Now, like if somebody say, hey, I made X amount of dollars for the day, it just doesn't do it for me anymore. What does it for me is helping someone and seeing on their face and in their family the relief that they know that they're actually with a firm actually going to take care of them. Not just give them lip service and then tell them, well, it's not really my business. Yes, I've been doing this industry for a long time, but I work for this mother company, this big, massive firm that I can't control the CEOs and I can't control the business decisions. And I work in this brand and I'm just subjective to some things that I can't control, but I'm going to do my best as an advisor to help you. That still doesn't cause peace of mind to come to families where we're in a place where we can say, we run the ship. We get to make the decision of what we do and don't bring on. Completely and fully. And that's a different dynamic. And that's why the peace comes on families' faces, because they know maybe for the first time, I'm with a place that honestly and genuinely is building things for me. I mean, that's one of the reasons. And we do a lot of social because we believe in our brand. So we want to share the story. We do a lot of media because of that reason. But we also want to educate. We want to share things with people. But I think the proof is in the pudding, in the fact that basically 100% of our clients, families that we work with have come from referral. Not many firms can say that. So that's really the proof in the pudding.